Hey folks, welcome back to Game Geeks. I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Today's episode, we are going to be reviewing the latest version of the Fading Suns rules as currently produced by FASA. We reviewed Fading Suns before. I have an absolute passionate love for the setting. I have a great deal of love for the types of story that you can tell with it and for the overall mood. I will say up front, one of the challenges that I've faced with this game is less the fact that it's a good game, which I think that it is, and more from the fact that it is such a very large kitchen sink science fiction setting with so much going on. I really don't know where to start with telling the kind of story that I want to. And I understand that you can very easily say, well, Kurt, why don't you just find a piece of it and go from there? It's a very easy criticism to make, but when you dearly love every piece of a setting, it's hard to pick where you want that to be. I have a similar problem with Blue Planet in that I so enjoy all of it, I don't know where to start. So what do you have in the current revised edition Core Rules Player's Guide, which is what I have here? What you have is a framework pretty similar to what you've seen in the earlier editions. So it still operates off of what's called the victory point engine, which is you roll a d20. It is highest without going over your target number, which is usually determined by adding together an attribute and a skill and any number of modifiers. The higher you roll with being under that target, the better. Getting right on that target buys you some extra cool stuff, which you then roll a pool of d6s based off of some numbers and your success levels as presented by that d20, and look for another series of numbers, etc., etc., etc. If it sounds like it's an interesting combination of a d20 game and a White Wolf-derived dice pool game, I'm not going to deny that fact. I'm also not going to argue that some of the early development of this game was done by veterans of White Wolf and the early versions of Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage. What are some of the things that are different? The victory point chart is modified, so it's not as much divide by 3 as much as it is divide by 2 to get some of your victory point numbers. Some of the combat has been tweaked a little bit here and there for offenses versus defensive stances. There's a bit more expansion on some of the more fringe elements of the game, a bit more with some of the psychic powers, with the theurge, a little bit deeper background that the players, it's good to have that sort of thing in the players' hands. A lot of time, really deep background books try to keep as much out of the hands of their players as they can, simply because there's a lot of meta plot or a lot of hardwired information that should be part of the player's exploration of the universe. This is the player's guide, so there's not a lot in here about adversaries, about opponents, or about other difficult things or challenges that you can throw to your players, which will be much more represented in the GM's guide when that gets published. So in this, I feel like with the revised version of the rules, you have a slightly more complete presentation of the setting. You have modifications of the rules that make it a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to play. And along those lines, you have the presentation of a really good science fiction universe with an engine that gets a lot of bad press and it gets a lot of people grumbling about it, but in reality, it's not that bad of a game. It's actually a pretty good engine for modifying what it's trying to do. So I like the fact that this game is seeing press. I like the fact that this game is seeing the light of day and that it is sort of being reborn as a version of the rules and as an edition of the game that makes it accessible for a player who is just trying to get into it. My love of the game and my love of the setting has long been established back to the early days of Game Geeks, which you can find back in Game Geeks Classics, which is our first several batch of episodes. You're welcome to go back and watch those, if for no other reason, just to see how my hair grows and shortens, how my wardrobe changes, and how my weight goes up and down. And we have a different set for most of the episodes. For Game Geeks, I'm your host, Kurt Wiegel. Good day and good gaming.